Gabriella E. Morris is President of the Prudential Foundation and Corporate Vice President of the Community Resource Unit of Prudential Insurance Company of America, where she directs Prudential's relations with local communities and national and international philanthropies and nonprofits. She oversees grant-making and corporate contributions, Prudential's social investment portfolio, employee volunteerism, and community relations, as well as business diversity outreach. Through our skilled efforts, Prudential has made significant contributions to educational reform, youth leadership, and economic development. Gabriella joined Prudential in 1985 and assumed her current position in 1994. Committed to community outreach, she serves on a variety of boards, including Boys and Girls Clubs of Newark, the New Jersey Public Broadcasting Authority, the Women's Board of the New Jersey Performing Arts Center, the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund, and the New Jersey Schools Construction Corporation. She has an AB degree in architecture and urban planning and certification in African American Studies from Princeton University. She also has a law degree from the University of Texas School of Law. Gabriella?
Thank you very much for that introduction and for inviting me to be with you today. I am so glad that I was able to hear about all of the entrepreneurial efforts, even though I understood very few of them. Wiki, icky, sticky. But I'm reminded of one of my favorite stories to tell about Elizabeth Kristofferson, your distinguished lecturer today. Back when they were rolling out digital television conversion, and we took field trips to Sarnoff, and I said, I have no idea what they're talking about. And she said to me, you don't have to. All you need is a vision. All you need to think about is how you can use this technology. So I'm glad there's so many of you out there who have made heads and tails of this and have found ways to use technology and developments in science and engineering that can help all of us in the future. And from the projects I heard, it's very encouraging. I don't think that tonight you could have picked a more appropriate speaker than the fabulous Elizabeth Kristofferson, who stands at the precipice between entrepreneurship, I believe, and civic leadership. It's really quite a unique position to have to use entrepreneurial and business skills to run something so important as a communication medium under the guise of a civic project, really, given that the network is nonprofit. And it is a challenge to run such an enterprise in this environment. So I guess you could have read the information, and I hope you all did. And I figure I'm not here to read that back to you. I want to tell you something that maybe you couldn't read about or Google Elizabeth Kristofferson to find out those details, like she attended Wellesley College and that she was the director of institutional advancement for Bloomfield College, because she is a unique woman who defies description on the written page. What makes her extraordinary, I believe, and I think it's a good lesson for anyone in business, are those things you can't write about, and I'll call them her EQ. If you're familiar with the concept of emotional intelligence, and maybe some of you might call that executive presence. But I think it's essential in this day and age to be able to do the kinds of things that Elizabeth Kristofferson does because of her high EQ. And that's to be a connector of ideas, a connector of people. So don't let the grace, the style, the glamour, and the beauty you see walking up here put you off or confuse you at all, because beneath it all is a shrewd businesswoman. Because she knows her stuff. She is a student of what she is about. She knows her business. And I think her ability to convey that to people through her EQ is essential and speaks for her success. No one in this state has amassed a more impressive board than Elizabeth Kristofferson. And why? People are her stock in trade. People are her resources. And I think in that business, you need to know when and how to use whatever resources are at your disposal. And thus, with a high EQ, you know how to use the powerful people who sit on your board. Elizabeth gives much to many. And for her to ask me to do this, there was no way I could say no, because she makes it impossible for you to say no, because she knows when and how and what to ask you for. So I can't tell you how important it is for you to hear from someone like Elizabeth Kristofferson today. When I look, and so many of you are concerned or involved in the civic sector, as we see a movement from nonprofit to socially conscious businesses, it's important to know what makes those businesses work. I'm so proud to call Elizabeth Kristofferson a friend. Please join me in welcoming Elizabeth Kristofferson.
Wouldn't you all like Gabriella to change your plans, make sure she'd be there, and introduce you? Gabriella has indeed not only a cherished friend, but a mentor, a role model, and she's been a valued and wonderful not only board member, but also our board leader through some very, very exciting times, right, Gabriella? Yes, indeed. And so I'm just quite pleased to be with you today, and first of all, want to join you, as Gabriella noticed, to congratulate the 2008 student entrepreneurs and all who encourage and support you, because it is really exciting hearing about your plans and what you're doing and what is going to be happening here, and knowing that it's rooted in the Rothman Institute and Fairleigh Dickinson University. And thank you, Dean Moore and Director Baroud, for inviting me to be with you tonight on your 10th anniversary of an incredibly successful and growing program. I think we ought to give you all a great round of applause. Because over the past decades, this series has really featured an illustrious group of business entrepreneurs whose impact has been global and even beyond the borders of our planet. It featured Maxine Ballin, for example, who created a powerful technology council, Greg Olson, who's a research scientist and entrepreneur, and he was the third private citizen to orbit the Earth on the International Space Station. And last year, I was here to hear John Bailey talk about his top 10 lessons learned, and we listened very closely, John, to learn how you started a small business in New Jersey and grew it to an international enterprise. And John, would you just please stand? I think we all recognize you as a tremendous leader here. Indeed. Well, so it's an honor to be with this group. But every talk begins with a title, and I also brought some pictures here because I thought that's kind of fun. We're in the business of visual communications as well as audio and text too. But the title of this talk, The Business of Civic Entrepreneurship, its purpose, its innovation and partnership stems from the notion that I think civic entrepreneurship combines the elements of the business sector, the social sector, and the public sector, and that the civic entrepreneur needs to find imaginative ways to address social issues and meet community needs in order to bring about social change, and also experiments and innovates to bring together people and resources in a new way to deliver better outcomes for the people we serve, as author Greg Parsons notes. And where sometimes we think of the entrepreneur as someone who works independently, Gabrielle is quite right. The civic entrepreneur must collaborate with others to pursue our value and deliver a public service. At NJM Public Television, our metrics for success are not measured in the number of sneakers we sell, but if a child learns to read, or if a mother earns her GED, or a voter goes to the voting booth with more knowledge of the issues. And our decision-making, it's not something that one person might decide, or even two or three. It often involves governors and administrations and board members and multiple advisory board members and partner organizations and legislators and donors and regulators and more. Something to think about when you're trying to get something done. Tonight, as we talk about civic entrepreneurship in the context of public service media, I'd really like to share with you why NJN does what it does with these three themes: the purpose, the innovation, and partnership. Because, you know, I've been to a lot of these wonderful lectures, Jim and William, and I've really enjoyed them, but I sort of note that there are some very universal themes here. And I've also liked thinking about the special circumstances that people bring to describe the choices they make and bring them to life. But one thing that perhaps you've all read too, is Jim Collins, the author of Good to Great, who gave a great piece of advice, I think. He said, "We must reject the idea that the primary path to greatness in social sectors is to become more like business. The critical distinction is not between business and social, but between great and good. And a great organization is one that delivers superior performance and makes a distinctive impact over a long period of time." And that's what we're trying to do, I think, all of us, is make a distinctive impact over a long period of time. So for about 40 years, thanks to the wisdom of public officials, about 40 years ago they started NJN. They noticed that we're between New York and Philadelphia, still are, New Jersey is, and that we did not have any voice, right? And so you may know our NJN because of our nightly news with Kent Manahan, or Reporters Roundtable with Michael Aaron, or State of the Arts, or Due Process, or Sesame Street, or many other programs that PBS has brought throughout the years. And you might even know that we do have radio, and that we serve more than 45,000 children with literacy workshops and teachers, and also that you may not know that we do rank now among the country's leaders in public broadcasting in a number of areas, from local programs to innovative partnerships. But really, what allowed this to happen over the last 40 years? And besides a clear and sustained sense of purpose, really the ability to innovate and think outside the box, really literally, and strong partnerships, all components of a civic entrepreneur. So we're still the only television network that can reach everybody, and even in a world with over 300 satellite channels and lots of different media choices, still, I think New Jersey needs a non-commercial television network and a public media resource that really upholds public interest values and provides a forum for diverse voices that reflect the face of New Jersey, and promotes thoughtful communication that can uplift the human spirit, solve problems, and create positive change. So during the 40 years, we've been really focused on what we do in New Jersey and really providing the voice for New Jersey, providing made in New Jersey programs that matter and find a way to secure the resources to do so. So I'd like to tell you a few stories. One of our engineers, Dak, just walked in the room, and I'm glad because he was stuck in traffic, and he may even help us get some of our video going too. But way back in 1971, it took 2 months for engineers to launch our first broadcast, and the first words were, "And away we go." And it's been an adventure ever since. Because for about 2 decades, the television station has been licensed to the state and was mostly funded by the state. It's still licensed to the state, and it's created a lot of award-winning programs and services because of that. But back in about the early 1990s, the state had some very difficult choices to make. It had to make some budget cuts, and we were asked to go on the diet plan and to diversify our income streams beyond state government. So after several years of staff layoffs, which was fairly demoralizing for 3 or 4 years, they created, NJN created a separate 501c3 foundation to help raise public sector support and to create a new paradigm for NJN and its service to the state. So I joined the team at NJN in 1994, about 10 days before the end of the fiscal year. And I had my sad first assignment was to greet the staff and to say goodbye to approximately 40 of them. What a way to start a new job. But NJN also had to reduce our broadcast hours from about 3 in the afternoon to about midnight. That's when we were broadcasting, and there was clearly much work to be done. And even though we had just moved into a new building in Trenton, we took all our old equipment with us, equipment that was already aging and had to be replaced. And so we also had a new administration that had considered selling the network altogether. Is this job sounding better? Okay, fortunately, we had many people who wanted to help us and who believed in the purpose of NJN and our mission and why we're there in a knowledge-based society. How important is it to have quality information? So since 1993, the NJN Foundation, with a tremendous board comprised of some of our state's civic leaders, greatest civic leaders, has raised over $95 million to support programs and services and the people who make them. Of course, there are a few more challenges. We weren't done, because a couple years later, the federal government decided that it was going to ask every broadcaster to change the way they did everything, but they weren't going to tell you how to do it. They weren't going to tell you, they weren't going to give you any money to do it, but they were going to tell you what deadline you had to do it by, or else they were going to take your license away. And of course, I'm talking about, because Gabrielle mentioned it, that there was no rule to explain how to change from the analog broadcast to the digital broadcast. So that became even more exciting, because NJN for years had relied on the state for any capital support it needed. After all, if the state owns the building, it should take care of a leak in the roof. Sounds right. But we debated how our need for about $40 million for the conversion would fit in the state's plan that we go on a diet plan. So we had no capital support for this $40 million conversion, and this looming deadline that threatened a loss of license. We had to raise all this money for operations and stop having any more staff reductions. We have a tremendous staff, and we wanted to keep them. So we joined an innovative public-private partnership with Sarnoff. I thank Jim Carnes to this day, and a consortium of 7 major high-technology firms, and served as the beta test for a high-definition television broadcast technology project. It was the largest in its kind in the nation, about $60 million. And what we did was test how a piece of equipment would work for mid-range broadcasters. Well, we negotiated with Sarnoff to have one piece of equipment, which was worth about $500,000, to stay at NJN so that we could use that as collateral to then apply for a federal grant, which again wasn't usually done, so we had to negotiate that too, to get the federal grants folks to say yes to that. And then we received one of 7 federal awards, which we used to launch NJN's digital broadcast signal on one of our transmitters to then become one of the top 10 stations to begin broadcasting. So now there are over 170 different licensees, but somehow through no money and through good partnerships, we're able to be among the first 10 in the nation to begin broadcasting in digital. Now, why was that important? That was important because it allowed us a chance to experiment and to learn what other things we could do with the digital broadcast, which was clearly going to be our future. So we launched this tremendous outreach program to help stakeholders see what the benefits of digital broadcast might be, all that visioning that Gabrielle was talking about, because the federal grant didn't begin to cover all of the money that we needed for the 3 other transmitters. And so while most of my fellow PBS counterparts were focused on those beautiful pictures, I hope some of you have high-definition television sets at home, or were thinking of getting them, or know someone who does, because they're just the clarity and the sound, and it's so wonderful. But most people were thinking about high definition because that's where it's sexy and exciting and wonderful. And what we thought about at New Jersey Network was how to use those leftover bits of the spectrum to do other things. So, for example, we thought, how could we use it for education? How could we use it for other services, too? And with the vision and support of, the governor's, cabinet officers, and others, we partnered with the Department of Labor and the Workforce Development to develop a program for adults that needed a second chance. Now, you may or may not know that there are about 40% of adults that operate at the lowest literacy levels and need a second chance to better their skills, to help them get GEDs, to help them enter the workforce. So Gabriella, I remember so proudly when you, as chair of the New Jersey Broadcast Authority, were there to cut the ribbon at the first site to help adults who needed this second chance earn their high school degree, improve their literacy in math, reading, and compute and other skills that they needed to find a job. Because since then, we provide the multimedia software and video to community-based work sites around the state, and we now serve 50 sites and have served over 16,000 adult learners. We've also created one of the first digital broadcasts on a daily basis that featured success stories. And one of my favorite, I used to love these digital broadcasts because I would call them sort of NGN's version of the Oprah Winfrey Show. where we would get people tell about what they did and why they did it and how it made them feel, and everyone would gather at 10 o'clock in their sites to feel motivated and inspired. So here we're going to see if this video works, because it's 46 seconds of Gloria Cortez telling why this program's so important when she left the welfare ranks, got her driver's license and a job. Here's her story.
I've been working here at the JTPA, well, now WIA, for 5 years. Before that, I was CWEP, which is Community Work Experience, for 1 year and 3 months. Before that, I was on welfare for 19 years of my life. I have a 25-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old. I mean, when I came in here, I didn't even have a driver's license. Now I drive, I have a car. I mean, everything is coming together so nicely. And the most important thing to me is my 25-year-old is so, so proud of me. That she tells me so often, that's it. That's all I need.
And what a tremendous return on investment that is to hear the pride that she has and the pride with her family and the way it's affecting her too. Well, a few years later, we've been continuing to work on providing more television programs and expanding our radio network, and that was done thanks to an innovative negotiation with the Food Channel Network. They're here because NJN helped give them a place on the New York cable stations. And we also then continued to work to fulfill our purpose, and we were grappling with less operational support and insufficient capital support, but expanding our services nevertheless as people were giving us new sources. We were finding new sources. And all of this took a different perspective around 9/11. And I think all of us can remember where we were and how we felt during that day and the days and the weeks that followed. But one of my most painful memories is remembering the calls from the people who called seeking information about missing relatives. They didn't know where to turn, they didn't know what to do, so they called a place that they had a source for information. And I remember getting the call that said, "My son was on the 105th floor, can you help me find him?" And of course we know the answer to that. But also as a good neighbor, and we broadcast WABC's signal in addition to our own newscasts and bulletins about ABC's, because ABC's tower went down also and could not broadcast. And we began to think more and more, what was our role during times of emergency, because people asked us where they could get Jersey-centric information when things happened. And so now here's where the bit that we were, when I talk about the bit casting and left over the spectrum, we can now broadcast to the public maybe in standard definition or even high definition, and still have bits left over to send information or text or audio to first responders at the same time. So off of our towers, if there's a fireman who wants to enter a burning building, he can look on his laptop and get blueprints sent to him from one source to another. Or there are other examples to get hurricane or other information. In other words, everything that you can have on your desktop computer, we can now send over our towers wirelessly and send it securely. So it began a whole new business line for us, and we're very proud, I think, that we've now about to receive a very large federal grant to help us bring this to more places in New Jersey. But part of what we thought about in 9/11 was also the not only broadcasting programs like America Together, New Jersey Voices. We went around and invited people to tell their stories and combine them together with a program that we broadcast. But we're also asked to do a special program for families, the victims, at Liberty State Park on Sunday, September 23rd. And we reached out to the New Jersey Symphony Orchestra, Ray Charles. We asked Christopher and Dana Reeve to serve as masters of ceremony, because think of all that they had gone through together. And I will never forget the silence among a sea of thousands of people when they spoke, because they drew upon their courage and their outlook, and they encouraged families who had lost loved ones in the Twin Towers to believe that they would once again experience joy in their lives. And Christopher Reeve said, "Once you choose hope, anything's possible." And Dana offered similar words of encouragement that day. And I'd like to show just an excerpt from that program that we broadcast.
Our country will heal. We as individuals will heal. Believe it or not, I think you'll find as time moves forward that you can, remarkably, still experience joy, even as you feel pain and loss. There is still laughter ahead, even as there are tears, and hope, even amidst uncertainty. Here are a few tips. Number one, love one another. Reaching out to someone will actually have the very welcome effect of making you feel better as well. Number 2, pray. Whether they be prayers from an organized faith or your own personal secular prayers, leave time in your life for reflection and gratitude. Number 3, remember that in everyone's life, pain is inevitable, but misery is optional. Choose to live a life with joy, even within the pain. And finally, hang on to precious memories, but don't let them hang on to you. Be brave enough to keep moving forward. Our hearts are with you.
You know, it's sort of hard to continue sometimes after seeing that piece because it brings us back, but I think Dana also encouraged us to do that, to keep going forward. And so as we did, we continued to build new partnerships and to think about the people that we served in our state, and particularly thinking about Thomas Friedman, how the world's getting flatter and how we're all connected globally too. And so we've had a long-standing commitment to providing positive role models for young people through Images of Mahnez, the Hispanic Youth Showcase, Another View, many other programs. But this past March, I had the privilege to fulfill a long-standing personal dream to travel to India with a group of businesswomen around a children's program called Children's Hope. And while I was there, I had the opportunity to interview Governor Patel, who is the first woman governor of Rajasthan. She's now president of India. She's in her 70s, and Her Excellency entered public life when she was 27. And she became a fierce advocate for universal education, healthcare, and helped advance opportunities for women and for children. And when I asked her what her greatest sacrifice was, she told me not raising my own children, because she said her father had told her that her extended family would take care of her children and that the children of India needed her more. Now, we're using that interview and pieces of it this September when we create a town hall meeting, and the businesswomen who hosted us are coming to New Jersey, and we're reaching out to entrepreneurs who want to make additional connections but also see themselves as citizens of the planet and connect with new audiences too. So let's cut to television in terms of, that's our television term, for what the future holds for NJN and how we're addressing it. I'm going to do a very fast, in about 60 seconds, give you a speed quiz afterwards on television, because many of you may not know that about 75 years ago, Zworykin invented the first television set, which was only about the size of a 1-inch screen. And in the early in the 1930s, this is a promotional ad for TV that came from the New York Times, and it features a group of wealthy people dressed in their evening wear, sort of tuxedos and so forth, because they thought television was going to be so rare and so exciting that people would actually get dressed up to go see it, right? I mean, who would have it? Maybe one of us would have it in this room. But so much for predictions, because I think Newton Minow got it right when he understood that television was a box and it was how you used it that was most important. So we've gone from black and white to color, from analog to digital, and we're in the midst of this incredible revolution with broadband, wired or wireless. And imagine in 1968, which is, don't know if all of you were even born by then, but there were no cable television, VCRs, or home video cameras, satellite, fiber optics, or the internet, no TiVo, no DVRs. So we're just moving at this incredible speed. I think we're talking about a thinking in motion, right, as really capturing that sense of the incredible speed that, that we're dealing with now. And if you think that the daily edition of the New York Times contains more information than the average person living in the 17th century would see in a lifetime, it's just mind-boggling what information is coming at us all the time or is accessible. And clearly everything's moving so much faster. So as we're thinking about where NJN's going, we started this March with a grant from CPB to create a national model and toolkit around a broadband summit. And we brought people from 5 different sectors to come think again, creating almost a planning that's a wiki. We didn't think of a sticky me, but I mean a wiki, if you will, to start collaborating together on where we wanted our state, what kind of visioning did we want for our state that would drive changes in our state that would use broadband to improve our state too. Now, the whole conference is on www.njn.net, but I'd just like to give you the setup piece, if you will, that will show that video, Bobby, that will let them have a sense of how fast this future is changing and something we did to start thinking about our future too.
In the days before our nation began its struggle for independence, the colony of New Jersey was already known for its fertile lands. The people of this land worked hard to make things grow. Their very survival depended on learning how to relate to the world around them.
And over time, they learned to work together, to collaborate, to connect.
So, one morning a man opens his eyes and thinks, how long have I been in the shower? Because it's the future already, but not the one Orwell wrote about. Well, maybe a little, but the one like all the kids were already enjoying yesterday. You know, where everybody's wired, but in a good way, because look, there are hardly any wires, and everybody's connected when they want to be, and it's even better than what the kids were doing yesterday, because the very heart of learning starts in the classrooms, where there's personalized learning, and where students collaborate with each other and with their teachers through wiki apps and wiki-based textbooks accessible on Wi-Fi devices anytime, and there are rich sources of info, both archived and live, so that there's learning on a global scale, and the classroom walls are meaningless unless you want to hang a map, but even maps are interactive. And children are learning how to learn, so they'll be ready for careers that don't even exist yet. But that's not all. In the future, we're all living our lives like that. We're connected to an infinite variety of information and entertainment, and after all, what is life without color and dance and music? So now our connection to the arts is as vibrant and alive as ever. This is big. It's lifestyle, and life comes at us from all angles, and it pays to be prepared and to stay connected, because if history tells us anything, it's that we can learn from the past, so it's inevitable that the people who keep us safe need to be informed and aware and connected through systems like data casting. And of course, where our health is concerned, in the future we're in charge, because after all, we are independent and we need to understand our own well-being, which is where things like telemedicine and digital records databases come in handy. But that's not all. Here in New Jersey, connectivity is one of our major assets. It's all around us. So the potential for creating and retaining jobs and growing incomes in the future is greater than just about anywhere else in the country. And there's even more. There's Wi-Fi and VCAST and GIS and GPS and virtual community displays and e-government services and non-radiative resonant energy transfer, and we're all connected. And it's all coming to a future near you.
I love that last slide where it says broadband collaboration is highly recommended, because it certainly is in our business and what we're doing too as we think about the future. But here we are. So the industry's changed enormously in less than a century. In less than a decade, our funding patterns have changed enormously and our partnerships have changed. And so what's next for NJN? Well, here we are in one of the state's most difficult budget crises. I don't think anybody would think this is a good place to be for our state at this point to this, and with terrible choices to be made. People are deciding to eliminate departments and do things like that. And our funding proposed cut has been about 28%. Just to give you a sense of that, on a $19.3 million budget for the operating company to this, it's not the combined income, but for the operating company, we get about $12 million of personnel costs, and less than $6 million of that came last year from direct appropriations. So our funding pattern, we're being suggested that they then cut us another several million that may bring us down to about 22% of that budget. So we've been looking at all the rules that come along with being part of state government, all the complexity and all the difficulty to sort of help plan and be nimble and so forth. And we've been looking at how we might provide an alternative. As the governor said, he's open to alternatives rather than having just cutting or doing things. And we proposed that perhaps we would keep everything the same, keep the mission the same, keep our purpose the same, try to do more programming, more services, more great content here, but that to change the structure structure because out of the approximately 170 licensees in the system, 90 of them are licensed to the communities and only 20 are licensed, are state licensees. So that's the next chapter that you're probably reading about in the news about NJN. And of course, there are lots of questions to be answered, lots of time talking to lots of stakeholders, but it's all about a love for, I think, our purpose and the people that create the programs and the things that we can do together. So we're working really hard to fulfill our goals to serve New Jersey and the future of NJN and the talented team who really creates these programs, as well as being New Jersey's public media source for the information about, for and about our state, with programs that I hope really touch and transform lives and communities, and for initiatives that create communities and encourage civic engagement. And I guess that's my last point about the civic entrepreneur is the need for civic engagement, because our country was founded on the principles such as participation and engagement. But what do you think when more people vote for American Idol than vote in the voting booth? What do you think when someone like Robert Putnam, the author of Bowling Alone, warns that our stock and social capital, the fabric of connections with one another, has plummeted in recent years and really impoverishes our lives and our communities? And he suggests that communities where people are more engaged with each other, their streets are safer, their education is better, and their economy is stronger. So engagement can be something as simple as volunteering in a soup kitchen, serving on a local community planning board, joining a watershed protection organization, supporting FTU or NJN to this. And I was thinking about that about a week ago when I had the opportunity to introduce Dr. Sylvia Earle as part of the Star Ledger Green Expo, and we were showing a program on green builders, where she's a great leader, she's a great advocate for that blue planet, all the ocean, and she said, I want to share the exhilaration of discovery and convey a sense of urgency about the need for all of us to understand the nature of this extraordinary planet. Dr. Earle believes that when we know more, we will care more and become better stewards of our planet. And in essence, I think that's what we're trying to do with NJN2, to help people know more through the stories of our heritage, our history, to know more about our state daily, and especially in times of emergency, to give context to these events that touch us, to be conscious for our state, and through doing so, really encouraging individuals and communities to come together to connect for a civic purpose. So our purpose, our ability to innovate, and our growing partnerships really fortify us so we can make these vital connections to nourish the intellect and validate the human spirit and build stronger and safer communities. And really, what more could a civic entrepreneur wish for? And in all we do, our goal is to motivate, to inspire, to educate, to collaborate. And yet, it begins with the choices each of us makes each day. So this is my final video for you, actually an almost final video for you. We're just toward the end, but I want you to watch it because it's one of my favorite videos about the power of one. Now, wouldn't it be great if everyone could see that a little bit? We start talking about what question do you want to ask every day? What kind of media do you want in your child's mind every day? What kind of media do you want in your neighbor's mind? And I think it's that we're trying to convey, our purpose and our passion, and thinking about taking some innovative risks and celebrating the learning experiences with our collective successes, and really deepening our partnerships and our impact and our value and our significance. You know, I hope to come back here for future lectures when we'll have the opportunity to hear some of the stories of those of you around the room and celebrate the great opportunities ahead of us. And I'd really like to close, I guess, with a clip from NJN News, which was on Monday night. You may have seen it, from the New Jersey Hall of Fame this past Sunday, because it reminded me of the great pride that I certainly have in our state. And it's all because I think of, you'll recognize it's a song from one of New Jersey's own. It celebrates the pride in our state, and especially the people like you who make it a great state. And so I'd like you to take a little clip and then thank you.
Was a so-called Garden State benediction recited by the boss, which poked fun at the challenges of being from Jersey.
And even with this wonderful Hall of Fame, we know that there's another bad Jersey joke just around the corner. But fear not, this is not our curse, it is our blessing. For this is what imbues us with our fighting spirit. Glory day, glory day.
Spirits ran high at the end of the evening when Springsteen rocked the pack with a little help from another Jerseyan, actor Danny DeVito. Organizers admit this year's ceremony will be a hard act to follow, but they're looking forward to the challenge.
And I'll just close that the boss had his mother there, and he said it's the only time that he thought he'd ever be honored in the same category with Albert Einstein. But what a tremendous state we have, where you can have Bruce Springsteen, Albert Einstein, and what a gift to share all of that with you. Thank you so much.